join the next, and we are going to have the industry keynote. Ladies and gentlemen, our next speaker, Mr. Ganesan Ramani, Vice President, Head of Digital GRC Mashreq Bank. Mr. Ganesan, a seasoned leader and specialized in IT, GRC, information security governance and compliance, IT audits, technology and operational risk management, and digital forensics. He is a regular speaker at various industry forums and passionate in teaching and mentoring on the topics of GRC, cybersecurity, and auditing. So let's everybody welcome Mr. Ganesan Ramani. Over to you, gentlemen.
Good evening. I would first like to thank DataQuest and Scout Automation for organizing this event. I think on a Friday evening, happy to see so much of faces, and of course, yes, we've been working hard for a week, and definitely we should take some time off later after this. This is a heavy topic for a Friday, but still. I think the first two speakers set a really good context, right? Especially on the India story where we are at, and of course, Navneethan highlighted about the various needs for compliance and how do we go about it. So I'll just spend another next 10 minutes, a kind of a very sharp one, like what it takes and what is technology compliance all about, and all about cybersecurity, especially for the banking and a fintech ecosystem, right? So let's quickly go inside the topic. Of course, generally we have this disclaimer whenever we talk. Moving on, I just want to touch on few basics around what really means technology compliance, and what are the standards, compliance standards, what we are looking at, and of course, is there any kind of a simple model which we can adopt in the organization, especially on the fintechs, and then what are the best practices? I'll just leave it to you with some of the best practices in that mind, right? One thing what we have to always really think about it is like anything we do, we are supporting the business objective. The business objective is a key, right? The business has got a business process, and to kind of ensure the business process works, we build IT systems and security layers around that. So business objective is a first prime key thing which everyone has to get it in the mind. Then we talk about two different types of analogies in any organization. The first dimension, what I want to bring it is on the people, process, and technology dimension. You take any organization, whether it is a bank, fintech, or any organization across the world, organizations are made up of people who run the show, who are very critical and important, who run the show, and then the process, what kind of process we execute, the business process, the technology process, what we execute. And of course, the technology, whatever we are using, are we using the right technology, right? And sometimes what happens is technology keeps on evolving so fast, we kind of say, oh, okay, the new technology has come in, so can we put it up instantly and then migrate it? Maybe sometimes it is not required. So we have to always think the people, process, and technology dimension when it comes to overall operation of any organization. That's very, very key and important. We always say about people, PPT, people, process, and technology. The other dimension is around the governance, risk, and compliance, right? We talk about compliance, technology compliance. We have to be compliant with standard A, B, C, D. All perfect, no problem at all. But again, what we are trying to achieve, okay? We are trying to achieve a good governance on the top, right? From the management layer or from a department or a functional perspective, we are looking for good governance. The second important thing is something around risk management, which I want to highlight. At any given point of time in the world, you cannot be compliant with all the 100% of the controls. The reason being, your business objective might be different, you might not have the required investment to upgrade, or there might be multiple other factors, dependencies with your vendors, so a lot of stuff. So how do we put the hand of or a hat of risk management and think what is a better risk, what is our appetite, what we can do, what we should not do? That is very important. The third part is compliance. The compliance is getting up more and more in the last decade. The reason being is there has to be some bare minimum standards met, right? Compliance standard, whatever we talk about, I think I have few compliance standard coming up. Navneet touched upon few areas around PCI DSS, NSE standards, NIST CSF. So we have so many standards. What these standards try to tell us? These standards try to tell us that these are the bare minimum security levels which you can maintain in the organization and get yourself certified for that particular bare minimum standards. So that is a very important thing around compliance. So governance, risk and compliance is always a kind of a brothers and sisters. You have to, we can't separate them. You have to keep them together and ensure that what is right for your organization, what is within the risk appetite of your organization, that is what we have to look into it. Moving on around having compliance and assessment, I'm just trying to link it to the previous topic. So we have various standards. I think I've listed so many standards if you look into it in terms of I think Navneet touched upon majority of the areas, so I don't want to go in depth. The IT Act is a very important one in India. And of course, we are talking about being a fintech and a fintech superpower in the world. So it doesn't mean that we kind of have to be compliant with only with the India laws, right? So the evolution of fintech is a very interesting stuff, right? So we had banks in the past 100 years, right? Banks are there and they've been running, they've been serving people, business process and stuff like that. Then why we need fintechs? Because there are even more super business processes which banks might not be currently focusing on, which fintechs can give a value to the ecosystem and to the stakeholders. That's why you get variety of ideas which is related to the financial world where banks are not there but fintechs are there, right? And over a period of time, fintechs were considered as small players by the banks because banks have a very set system. They have a big capital. You have everything on the air. You have everything. However, over a period of years, banks also realize that we have to participate in the fintech ecosystem and the community. You see, banks offering application program into APIs, open banking. So we talk about it, right? Banking as a service. So in these space, there are a lot of fintechs and banks work with the fintechs to get all these things done. Of course, banks are very much regulated entities, right? You have a regulator sitting, whether it is in India or across the world. So I've been working with multiple regulators. I've worked with more than 40 regulators across the globe. So everyone has got a process level, maturity level, and how they look into things like that, right? So there needs to be a harmonization of the standards. So that's the reason why you have all these standards like ISO, PCI DSS. You talk about HIPAA in healthcare. So many standards are there, and some of these standards are mandated for operating on business. For example, in the fintech and especially in the retail space, if you are working on card processing, like you issue a debit card or a credit card, or you are part of the supply chain of these cards, you are mandated by the payment branch now to have PCI DSS mandatory as certified. The reason being is that's a bare minimum security standard they think which can protect their business interest. That's the reason why it has been given there. So let's come into the organization perspective, how we have to kind of look into these compliance. Compliance come up from various dimensions. You have the legal dimension and the cybersecurity requirements like IT acts and things like that. Privacy has been catching up in the last 10 years, right? What is considered, Navneet gave a very good example, like the telephone book, right? Every year it gets published and we'll be so happy that our name, my dad's name and the phone number got displayed. But no, it is not the case. We don't want to give the mobile number to anyone, right? So the privacy angle is important, and again the geopolitical situations are also changing up so rapidly. Some of the examples, like for example, if you're supporting a process of a particular country, if that country feels that you are unfriendly to the other country, they say that no, you cannot do your outsourcing or your vendor cannot be that in the part of the country. So the geopolitical is catching up. Of course, the KYC is a kind of a very old process which is running for 50 years. With the advent of digitization, digital transformation, the KYC has been kind of completely transformed, and because of the transformation, you have a lot of security risk as well, right? So opening up a bank account started with 4 minutes, 3 minutes. Now it is 1 minute. You can open up a bank account, a savings account in India within 1 minute, right? So it's possible. And of course, the AML, compliance laws, all these things are very, very important. And regulators around the world are catching up very nicely. They are becoming also super smart. Their systems are getting smarter. They're getting smarter people from the market. And this would be a continuously evolving trend, right? So moving on to the next next topic, which is very important, I just want to leave you that how we can set up a basic framework for technology compliance, right? So here I would really kind of little bit put into a system where the banking industry is very different with a fintech ecosystem. Banks have huge capitals. They can run out big projects, they can get best tools in the market, and they can protect their interests, right? But fintechs don't do that, right? Fintechs is like you're not having that much capital or that much revenue or a money power to get everything. But what is the minimum thing I have to adhere to? That's very important. So for fintechs, what business process you operate and what are the legal and compliance requirements in your area are the basic stuff which we need to take care. Of course, I've just given a model. This model works for Indian fintechs and even fintechs who are supporting outside countries' businesses as well. Very simple stuff, right? This is a little bit of technical and this is a little bit of process as well. If you see the perimeter and endpoint security, there are a lot of devices and things, base level devices like firewall, network. How do you get into your ISP? What is the cloud service we are using? And again, of course, cloud came up with a big bang and we thought it is more secure, but again, security is always a myth, right? There are only two kinds of people. People who think that I'm not secure, or people who think that I'm so secure, but it is not the case, right? Malware, web security, data loss protection and prevention, that's very, very important. Of course, in fintechs, they revolve around multiple. Your innovation comes into your applications, mobile app, what you deliver to your customer. So when you do that, you have an enthusiastic group of developers and they kind of develop all these things. So, however, before it goes to the live production, some of the things around the application security, I think Navneet touched upon it nicely on that. AppSec, how it is important and critical and how we do it, right? It's very important. And there are best industry standards and practices around that which you can adopt, right? And of course, on the operational security, still this is a kind of an area where there is less focus, and this is also one of the prime reasons, like whom you are hiring, what is a background check being done? Not only for your permanent staff, you might do a very good background check for your permanent staff. What about vendors? Do vendors do the same kind of a rigor? Like how do you do background check? And of course, onboarding a guy, offboarding a guy, this is always a challenge, right? You onboard a guy and suddenly after some time he leaves away with the company because of X, Y, Z reason. We fail to delete that account, right? So that is something like still a fundamental problem what I see in the fintech and the other eco spaces. Business continuity planning, this is like very, very important. Of course, the bigger COVID wave which happened like the last 2.5 years, we survived just because of our digitization and the business continuity what we had. How this internet bandwidth, work from home, all these things came up, and right? So these are the essential components. And of course, the bottom layer is very, very important. How do you play your governance, regulatory compliance? How do you manage risk? Again, I'm again reiterating, not every control, not every compliance you can be always 100% compliant, right? But how do you ensure that you're compliant as much as possible and you're taking calculated risk on certain areas? And how are you convincing your auditors and other people saying that, yes, we see a risk, what are the mitigating controls I have and how I can thrive in my ecosystem? And again, you should not always bombard business saying that, oh, I have to implement this 100 controls. Give me another $50K or $100K. I want to buy this product or a service. That's not the way. I think we should not burden business. We should be business enablers rather than being disruptors and say, give me the money, otherwise I'm not going to do the work. So that is something like in the technology world, it has been too pertinent and we have to avoid that. And of course, the audits, having reasonable audit and ensure that you get an independence, you give independence to the auditors, show them the entire ecosystem, and we should not be always a defensive about, oh my God, I will get a finding. It's not like that. You get a finding, it is for the improvement of yourself. So that culture has to be inculcated in the company. So we should say our employees, vendors, saying that, okay, it's okay to get findings, nothing wrong in it. Let's look into it and let's fix it and let's understand what is the risk behind the audit, right? Audit finding. Audit is always not a kind of a punishing tool. It should not be taken as, if you have a culture where audit is taken as a punishing step, then you will not thrive. Oh, that's a kind of a thing in my last 2 decades, I can say that, right? Where the good culture and the bad culture is there, right? I would leave it to the last point around what are the best things. These are all very much little technical, and of course everyone knows about it. basic fundamental stuff. How do you classify your data, right? Whether it is confidential, secret, or top secret, and how do you protect your assets in terms of network, in terms of how do you have basic encryption, how are you doing it, how are you having the identity and access management stuff for your critical assets and crown jewels, and you have so much of third parties. How do you kind of ensure that you run an assessment on the third parties, get the basic demographics? So 5 years back, 10 years back, when we had these third party risk management, it used to be a nightmare. We used to run with Excel sheet running behind 100 or 200 vendors what we have. Now we have got more sophisticated tools, and I think in the later part of the session we will just discuss about it. But how this pain point has also been addressed, like where you can trigger focused risk-based third-party risk management assessments and how you can get a benefit out of it. And of course, you would be subjected to a ransomware attack or any attack, denial of service. So what is your response plan for against all those top 5 scenarios which you might hit? What are the step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 you do? So that is a fundamental thing which is missing in most of the, especially in the fintechs and the startups around that. We think of a great product, we want to deliver a great value to our customers and clients, but fundamental stuff, tomorrow if there is a disruption to that service, then what is the backup plan? How do you respond to it? So that is something like every regulator and things are kind of going to. When you are in fintech, you cannot get away with compliance because BFSI is a regulated industry. Like unlike healthcare and defense, it's a very, very regulated industry. Whether you like it or not, you have to follow the rules of the game. You should be wearing your governance, risk and compliance hat, balance the risk, ensure that don't take any risk more than your appetite, right? Because you see the fines are getting up higher and higher, so it's very important. So these are the fundamental step. I just want to leave you with the thoughts, right? 3 basic thoughts. Think about people, process, technology. Think about the overall governance, risk and compliance. Compliance is a bare minimum standard which you want to achieve. It's not that I get a certificate and I'm foolproof from security. That is also a myth. Navneet nicely touched upon. It's a bare minimum standard. Just you complete your schooling and you enter into a college. For entering into a college, you have to complete your schooling, right? So those are the fundamental facts. And have a risk-based approach, and don't forget that you are doing all these things for achieving the business objective. You are supporting the business objective. It's not about implementing a great product or great security stuff. I have got the best in class. It's fine, but end of the day, you are supporting the business objective, and the business objective has achieved. We have achieved it or not really matters. With that note, thank you so much, and thank you all. And if you have any questions, I think maybe 1 or 2 we can take it up or outside of the networking dinner also. Thank you.